Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Syracuse heading into 2024, one of the more fascinating programs that we're going to see across the country. And it starts with new head coach Fran Brown, who the Syracuse fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of months know that I was a massive fan of this hire. And although we have question marks about what he looks like as a head coach, because we've never seen him as a head coach, we know he's going to get it done in the talent acquisition department. He's one of the best recruiters that we've seen in the country over the last couple of years in college football. And for a lot of college football fans who follow this sport relatively closely, you know where it starts. It starts with getting talent on your roster. Fran Brown's going to be able to do that at Syracuse. And not only have we seen him do that over the last 6 months, hammering the transfer portal, making a lot of good additions, you kind of just feel comfortable that this depth chart and roster for Syracuse is only going to get more talented over the next couple of years. Really excited to dive into this 2024 depth chart, take a look at the schedule, and kind of predict and project this Syracuse team heading into 2024. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And many of y'all know I'm a Rochester guy. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of football games in the Carrier Dome following this program. I am excited for the Fran Brown era in Syracuse, New York. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And I think much more importantly, there's so many new faces on this roster. If I'm sleeping on a name, throw them in the comments section. I learn a ton from you guys. There are some names that I'm going to talk about that aren't even on the screen that we kind of have to fill in as we go along. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. And without further ado, let's get into this one. You got to start at the quarterback position with Kyle McCord, who I think just gets an unfair treatment. You look at Kyle McCord heading into 2024, for Syracuse particularly, this is a massive upgrade from what they had at the quarterback position in 2023. But you look across the college football landscape, across the ACC landscape, there are not a lot of teams that wouldn't take Kyle McCord as their starting quarterback in the 2024 year. He has the opportunity to be one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. You take a look at the numbers from last year, 3,100 yards, a 66% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Really, really solid college football quarterback. And again, a massive upgrade from what Syracuse has had over the last couple of years, but specifically in 2023. You look at the pass catchers around him, I think this is maybe even more exciting than just bringing in Kyle McCord. He's going to have some weapons to work around him. They're big targets that can work vertically down the field. I think you have to start with Rondé Gaston at the tight end position as just being one of the more dynamic players that we see not only in the ACC, but in the country. And a healthy Rondé Gaston can truly be that pass catcher one within this Syracuse offense. And then you take a look at some of the newcomers coming into this program. I'll start with the guy that we don't even see on the screen, and that's Justin Ross Simmons, coming over from Colorado State, Rochester, New York kid. So he's coming back home to Syracuse. This kid's super talented. One of my favorite wide receivers that was available in the spring transfer portal window. He's a smooth mover with a basketball background, with a big time frame that can operate after the catch. There's not many things that Justin Ross Simmons cannot do. You couple him up with a guy like Zeed Haynes, who Fran Brown knows quite well, having seen him every single day at practice in Athens, Georgia. Another really talented guy that sounded like he was kind of the wide receiver one within this Syracuse offense during spring ball. You pair him up with Jackson Meeks. I look at the Syracuse pass catchers and say, not only do you get Kyle McCord, which is an upgrade at the quarterback spot, I would argue that with the Rondé Gaston coming back in the transfer portal additions that they made, this is an upgrade from the pass catchers as well for the Syracuse offense. And who does that benefit the most? It probably benefits LaQuinn Allen the most. He's probably the best player on the Syracuse team that we saw in 2023, over 1,000 yards rushing. You go back and watch Syracuse in the 2023 season, it was so many loaded boxes because defense is new that Syracuse couldn't push the ball down the field. Now with Syracuse having a formidable passing attack, you're going to see some lighter boxes, some more opportunity for LaQuinn Allen to have a little bit more success running the football. I think the biggest beneficiary from this new passing attack that Syracuse is going to have is LaQuinn Allen. Then you look at the offensive line and say it's just chock full with the two deep being guys that are fourth, fifth-year guys who have played college football a long, long time. That just makes you really feel good about what the floor can be for this offensive line. A lot of guys that have played college football, they've played college football together. You make some additions in the transfer portal. I think Savion Washington was a really interesting get from Colorado. I look at the Syracuse offensive line and say, I don't think it's going to be the best unit in the country, but you feel pretty good that it's going to be solid because a lot of these guys are seniors and redshirt seniors and have played a lot of football at the collegiate level. You go over to the defensive side of the football, and I think it starts with what they did in the front seven. This front seven is going to continue to get better under Fran Brown. We kind of all know developing a good front seven just starts with getting freaky guys up front. It starts on the recruiting trail. Fran Brown's going to get that going at Syracuse. Now, the headliner for me is Fadil Diggs. I think he has the opportunity to be one of the better edge rushers that we see in this conference. He was always one of my favorite players at Texas A&M. You're bringing Deion Wilson Jr. Isaiah Hastings is another kind of fascinating get for Syracuse in the transfer portal where we haven't seen him play a ton of football, but we know this kid is super, super talented. A guy that picked up football late in his high school career. So I think his best football is still in front of him. He'll have a little bit more opportunity to get on the field. I kind of like what Syracuse has on the defensive line. You look at the linebacker room and say, has the potential to be one of the better units that we see in the ACC, headlined by Marlowe Wax, who I think is, quite frankly, just one of the more underrated players in this conference. Over 110 tackles last year, over 300 tackles during his career. And then you look at the defensive back room and say, you bring back Deuce Chestnut. If he can get back to what we saw him play at Syracuse, one of the better safeties in the conference, you're bringing Devin Grant from Buffalo. You're bringing a true freshman in Marcellus Barnes, who sounds like he is going to be a guy for Syracuse as a true freshman, kind of getting a taste of what Fran Brown can do on the recruiting trail. This was a kid that Georgia was coming in late for Marcellus Barnes, and Fran Brown's able to get it done, take a Tennessee kid, put him up in Syracuse, New York. Those are the type of things that if you're a Syracuse fan, you're extremely excited about the next couple of years, kind of winning some of these recruiting battles. All to say that I kind of like the secondary. And so you look at this Syracuse defense and say, I don't know if it'll be the best defense in the ACC. But again, kind of like we talked about with the offense, it's a lot of guys that you feel pretty solid about. You think the floor is pretty high for Syracuse on the defensive side of the football. And then you look at the schedule and say, this is a very gettable schedule for Syracuse, and I want to focus on the first 5 games. I think there's a very real opportunity for Syracuse to start this season 5-0. You get Ohio at home, a team that has to replace a lot of talent from last year. That should be a win. You get Georgia Tech at home. That's probably your biggest toss-up game out of the first 5. You'd probably lean Georgia Tech. If Syracuse had to go on the road and play them in Atlanta, Georgia, you might lean Syracuse. Getting them in the JMA Wireless Dome, I'm going to still call it the Carrier Dome. If Syracuse can win that football game, going into their bye week, they have Stanford that has to travel across the country to play them. I'm not high on Stanford regardless. I think they could go beat them in California as well. You feel really good about that matchup at home. Holy Cross at home should be a win. On the road at UNLV, I think a trickier game than most Syracuse fans will give credit to. Certainly a winnable game. 5-0, going on the road to NC State. Now, I'm not going to pick Syracuse to go on the road and beat NC State. 1, they're very good at home. Number 2, I'm very high on that team. But then you get another off week. You go on the road to Pitt, a team that is very beatable, even on the road. You get Virginia Tech. That's another one of those games very similar to how we talked about with Georgia Tech. You want to play Virginia Tech at home. So I think that is certainly a winnable football game, even though I'm high on Virginia Tech. You go on the road to BC. You go on the road at Cal, which, again, the travel might be tricky. I think they're a better team than Cal. You get UConn at home, and then you get Miami at home as well. So you get a lot of games at home. I think more importantly, you don't play Florida State. You don't play Clemson. You don't play Louisville. You don't play some of the better teams in the ACC. I think NC State and Miami are probably the only 2 games that I'm picking Syracuse not to win. Outside of that, it's a lot of winnable football games. And if you get Fran Brown putting together an 8-4 season, year 1 in Syracuse, New York, what happens on the recruiting trail? That's what I'm most excited about. This Syracuse team, a lot to be excited about heading into the 2024 year. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.